Good morning and welcome to the Daily Light Devotion. I hope all of you have had a wonderful Good Friday yesterday and looking forward to today. That is the 4th of April. And today we are looking at Judges chapter 12 to 14 in the Old Testament, and the New Testament we're looking at Luke chapter 9, verses 37 to 62. And the Old Testament theme, Judges chapter 12, 13, 14, is God's purpose despite human weakness. And these three chapters continue Israel's downward spiral. We see internal conflicts among God's people, short term judges with little spiritual impact, and the rise of Samson, a man set apart by God but deeply flawed. Right? And these chapters highlight a sobering truth. God can use people for his purpose, but it does not mean their hearts are fully right. Right? Um, Judges 12, after Jephthah's victory, the tribe of Ephraim quarrels with him. This leads to civil conflicts and great loss of life. There are few minor judges lead Israel briefly, but there is no real spiritual renewal. This shows a nation divided internally, spiritually weak, lacking godly leadership. Human leadership often brings division and conflicts. Jesus, however, brings unity, peace, and reconciliation. Without God at the center, even God's people can fall into division. Judges 13, Israel again falls into sin and is oppressed by the Philistines. God begins a new plan. An angel appears to a barren woman, promises a son, Samson, and he's set apart as a Nazarite, right? And Samson is called to begin delivering Israel. This is a miraculous birth, God intervening before the deliverance even begins. Samson's birth points to forward to another miraculous birth of Jesus. But unlike Samson, Jesus is the perfectly set apart, perfectly obedient, fully aligned with God's will. God's plan of salvation begins with his initiative, not human effort. Right? And Judges 14, Samson begins his journey but immediately shows weakness. His desire, a Philistine woman against God's will. He acts impulsively and emotionally. He breaks aspects of the Nazarite calling. Right? Yet, even through this, God is working behind the scenes to confront the Philistines. Samson kills a lion, solves a riddle, and defeats enemies, but his life is marked by compromise, anger, and self centered decisions. Samson had great strength but weak character. Jesus, in contrast, had both perfect strength and perfect character, and has. Jesus never misused his power, he used it to serve and save. Gifts and strengths are not enough. Character matters to God, right? So we see that, and that that Jesus is the perfect deliverer, a true lasting transformation when we follow him, and a savior who not only defeats enemies but changes hearts. Only Jesus brings victory and transformation, right? And the key takeaways is division weakens God's people. God works even through flawed individuals, and strength without character leads to failure. And Jesus is perfect, deliverer we truly need. And moving over to the New Testament, Luke chapter 9, verses 37 to 62, we see the theme of true power, humility, and the cost of following Jesus. After the transfiguration, Jesus comes down to the mountain into real life, uh, and a desperate father, and sees the struggle of humans, a desperate father and demon possessed boy, the disciples' misunderstanding, teaching on humility and greatness, and a clear call of radical discipleship. The focus shifts from glory on the mountain to reality of following Jesus daily. Verses 37 to 43, a man brings his demon possessed son to Jesus. The disciples could not heal him. The boy suffers terribly. Jesus rebukes the unclean spirit and restores the boy to his father. The crowd is amazed at God's greatness. Jesus has authority where human effort fails, right? When what the disciples could not do, Jesus does with power and compassion. When we are powerless, Jesus is fully able. Verses 43 to 45, right after this miracle, Jesus tells his disciples, The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men, but they do not understand. They are focused on power. Jesus is pointing to the cross. Jesus' mission is not to display power, but to bring salvation through sacrifice. God's plan often looks different from our expectations. Um, uh, Luke chapter 9, verses 46 to 50, the disciples argue about who is the greatest. Jesus responds by placing a child before them, teaching that humility is greatness. He also corrects their exclusiveness. Whoever is not against you is for you. Jesus redefines greatness not by status but by humility and openness. In God's kingdom, humility matters more than position. And verses 51 to 56, when a Samaritan village rejects Jesus, James and John want to call down fire from heaven. But Jesus rebukes them. He does not come to destroy people, but to save them. So Jesus is full of mercy, not revenge. Even when rejected, he responds with grace. And followers of Jesus must reflect his mercy and not anger. Verses 57 to 62, three people express a desire to follow Jesus, but each hesitate. One does not understand the cost, one delays obedience, and one looks back. Jesus responds strongly. Following him requires total commitment. No excuse, no delays, no divided hearts. No one who puts his hand on the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom. Jesus calls for wholehearted devotion. He's not just inviting admiration, he's calling for surrender. And following Jesus requires full commitment, not partial loyalty. So, what are some of the key takeaways? Jesus has power where we are when we are weak. God's plan includes sacrifice, not just success. True greatness in humility is in humility, and Jesus calls for complete commitment. So, Luke chapter 9, verses 37 to 62 brings us down from the mountain into real life. It reminds us that following Jesus is not always easy, but always worth it. He has the power for our struggles. His grace is for our weakness, but he also calls us to follow him with full heart. The question is, will we follow him completely? And I leave you with that thought or that question today. Have a wonderful Saturday. I will see you tomorrow when we celebrate. We talk about celebrate Resurrection Sunday. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you tomorrow.